Is the rise of terrorism over the last decade in some way symbolic of what is happening to society in general?
Everything is deeply related with everything else that happens. The event of terrorism is certainly related with what is happening in the society. The society is falling apart. Its old ardor, discipline, morality, religion, everything has been found to be wrongly based. It has lost the power over people's conscience. Terrorism simply symbolizes that it does not matter to destroy human beings. That there is nothing in human beings which is indestructible, that it is all matter, and you cannot kill matter. You can only change its form. Once man is taken as only a combination of matter and no place is given for a spiritual being inside him, then to kill becomes just play. The nations are irrelevant because of the nuclear weapons. If the whole world can be destroyed together within minutes, the alternative can only be that the whole world should be together. Now it cannot remain divided. Its division is dangerous because division can become war any moment. The division cannot be tolerated. Only one war is enough to destroy everything. then there is not much time left for men to understand that we should create a world where the very possibility of war does not exist. Terrorism has many undercurrents. One, that because of the nuclear weapons, the nations are pouring their energy in that field, thinking that old weapons are out of date. They are out of date. But individuals can start using them. And you cannot use nuclear weapons against individuals. That would be simply stupid. One individual terrorist throws a bomb does not justify that a nuclear missile should be sent. What I want to emphasize is that the nuclear weapon has given individual people a certain freedom to use old weapons, which was not possible in the old days, because the governments were also using the same weapons. Now the governments are concentratedly destroying the old weapons, throwing them in the ocean, selling them to countries which are poor and cannot afford nuclear weapons. And all those terrorists are coming from these poor countries with the same weapons that have been sold to their countries. And they have a strange protection. You cannot use nuclear weapon against them. You cannot throw atom bombs at them. They can throw bombs at you, and you are suddenly important, having vast amount of atomic bombs, nuclear bombs in your hands. But sometimes where a needle is useful, a sword may not be of any use. You may have the sword, that does not mean that you are necessarily in a superior position than the man who has a needle. Because there are purposes in which only the needle will work. The sword will not be of any use. Those small weapons of the old times were gathering in the big powers and they had to dispose them, either drown them in the ocean. That means so much money, so much manpower, so much energy has gone to waste. Economically, it was disastrous. But just to go on piling them up was also economically impossible. How much weapons you can gather? There is a limit. And when you get a new way of killing people more efficiently, then the old simply has to be gotten rid of. It was thought that it is better to sell them to poor countries. And poor countries cannot create nuclear weapons. It costs too much. And these weapons were coming cheap as hell. They accepted it. But these weapons cannot be used in a war. In a war, these weapons are already useless. But nobody has seen the possibility that these weapons can be used individually, and a new phenomenon, terrorism, can come out of it. Now a terrorist has a strange power, even over the greatest powers. He can throw bombs at White House without any fear. Because what you have is too big and you cannot throw at him. And these are the weapons sold by you. But the phenomenon was not conceived because human psychology is not understood. My understanding is that the way man has lived, man needs each 10 to 12 years' time a war. He accumulates so much anger, so much rage, so much violence, that nothing short of a war will give him release. So war after war, there is a gap only of 10 to 15 years. That gap is a kind of relaxation. But again you start accumulating because the same psychology is working. The same jealousy, the same violence. And man is basically a hunter. He is not by nature vegetarian. First he became a hunter, and for thousands of years he was just a meat eater. And cannibalism was prevalent everywhere. To eat human beings caught from the opposite tribe you are fighting with was perfectly ethical. All that is carried in the unconscious of humanity. Religions have imposed things on man very superficially. His unconscious is not in agreement. Every man is living in a disagreement with himself. So whenever he can find a chance for a beautiful cause, freedom, democracy, socialism, any beautiful word which can become an umbrella to hide his ugly unconscious, which simply wants to destroy and enjoys destruction. Now the world war has become almost impossible. Otherwise there would have been no terrorism. Enough time has passed since the Second World War. The Third World War should have happened near about 1960. It has not happened. This has been the routine for the whole history. And man is programmed for it. It has been observed by psychologists that in wartime people are more happy than in peacetime. In wartime, their life has a thrill. In peacetime, they look bored. In wartime, early in the morning, they are searching for the newspaper, listening to the radio. Things may be happening far away, but they are excited. Something in him, something in them feels an affinity. A war that should have happened somewhere between 1955 and 1960 has not happened. And man is burdened. with the desire to kill, with the desire to destroy. Just he wants good names. Terrorism is going to become bigger and bigger, because the Third World War is almost impossible. And the stupid politicians have no other alternative Terrorism simply means what was being done on a social scale has now to be done individually. It will grow. It can only be prevented if we change the very base of human understanding, and which is a Himalayan task. More so because these same people whom you want to change will fight you. They won't allow you to change them easily. In fact, they love bloodshed. They don't have the courage to say so. In one of the existentialist novels, there is a beautiful incident which can almost be said to be true. A man is presented before the court because he has killed a stranger who was sitting on the beach. He had never seen the stranger. He did not kill him for money. He does not yet know how that man looked, because he killed him from the back, just with a big knife. They have never met, there was no question of enmity. They were not even familiar. They have not even seen each other's faces. And the magistrate could not figure it out. And he asked the murderer why you did it. He said, when I hit that man with a knife and a fountain of blood came out of his back, That was one of the most beautiful moments I have ever known. I know that the price will be my death, but I am ready to pay for it. It was worth it. My whole life I have lived bored, no excitement, no adventure. Finally I have to decide to do something. And this act has made me world famous. In every newspaper is my picture. And I am perfectly happy that I did it. There is no need for any evidence. The man is not denying, on the contrary, he is glorifying it. But the court has its own routine way. Still witnesses have to be produced. Just his word cannot be accepted. He may be lying. He may not have killed. Nobody has seen him. There is not a single eyewitness. So circumstantial evidences have to be presented by the police. Few of them are that this man has possibly killed according to his past life and his background. When he was young, his mother died. And when he heard that his mother has died, he said, "Sit, that woman will not leave me even while dying. It is Sunday, and I have booked tickets for the theatre with my girlfriend. But I knew she will do something to destroy my whole day, and she has destroyed it. The mother has died, and he is saying that she has destroyed her Sunday. He was going to theatre with his girlfriend, and now he has to go to the funeral. And the people who heard his reaction were shocked. They said, "This is not right what you are saying." He said, "What? What is right and what is wrong? Could not he die on any other day? There are 7 days in the week. From Monday to Saturday, she could have died any day, but you don't know my mother. I know her. She is a bitch. She did it on purpose. The second evidence was that he attended the funeral, and in the evening he was found dancing with his girlfriend in a disco. And somebody asked, What are you doing? Your mother has died today. So he said, so what? Do you mean now I can never dance again? My mother is never going to be alive. She will remain dead. So what does it matter whether I dance after 6 hours, 8 hours, 8 months, 8 years? What does it matter? She is dead. And I have to dance, and I have to live, and I have to love in spite of her death. If everybody was stopping living with the death of the mother, with the death of the father, then there will be no dance in the world, no song in the world. His logic is very right. He is saying, where you draw the demarcation line, after how many hours I can dance? 12 hours? 14 hours? 6 weeks? Where you draw the line, on what grounds? What is the criterion? So it doesn't matter. One thing is certain, whenever I dance, I will be dancing after the death of my mother. So I decided to dance today. Why wait for tomorrow? Such circumstantial evidences are presented to the court that this man is strange. He can do such an act. But if you look closely to this poor man, you will not feel angry at him. You will feel very compassionate. Now, it is not his fault that his mother has died. And he has to dance anyway, someday. So it makes no difference. You cannot blame this man for saying ugly things that she consideredly died on Sunday, to spoil my joy, because his whole experience of life must have been that she was again and again spoiling any possibility of joy. This is the last conclusion. Even in death, she will not leave him. And you cannot condemn the man by killing a stranger, because he is not a thief. He has not taken anything from him. He is not an enemy. He has not even seen who is the man he is killing. He is simply bored with life, and he wants to do something that makes him feel significant, important. He is happy that all the newspapers have his photo. If they had published his photo before, he would not have killed. But they waited until he kills, they would not publish his photo. And he wanted to be a celebrity, just ordinary human desires. And he was ready to pay by his life to become, at least for one day, known to the whole world, recognized by everybody. Until we change the basic grounds of humanity, terrorism is going to become more and more normal, everyday affair. It will happen in the aeroplanes, it will happen in the buses, it will start happening in the cars. It will start happening to strangers. Somebody will suddenly come and shoot you. Not that you have done anything to him, but just the hunter is back. The hunter was satisfied in the war. Now the war has stopped, and perhaps there is no possibility for it. The hunter is back. Now collectively we cannot fight. Each individual has to do something to release his own esteem. Things are interconnected. The first thing that has to be changed is that man should be made more rejoicing, which all the religions have killed. The real criminals are not caught. These are the victims, the terrorists and other criminals. But it is all the religions who are the real criminals, because they have destroyed all possibilities of rejoicing. They have destroyed of enjoying small things of life. They have condemned everything that nature provides you to make you happy, feel excited, feel pleasant. They have taken everything away. And if they have not been possible to take few things away, because they are so ingrained in your biology like sex, they have at least been able to poison it. Friedrich Nietzsche, according to me, is one of the greatest seers of the Western world. His eyes go really penetrating to the very root of a problem. But because others cannot see it, their eyes are not so penetrating, neither their intelligence so sharp. The man lived alone, abandoned, isolated, unloved, unrespected. He says in one of his statements, that man has been taught by religions to condemn sex, to renounce sex. Religion has not been able to manage it. And man has tried hard but has failed, because it is so deep rooted in his biology. It constitutes his whole body. He is born out of sex. How he can get rid of it except by committing suicide? So man has tried, religions have helped him to get rid of it. Thousands of disciplines and strategies have been used. The total result is sex is there, but poisoned. That word poisoned is a tremendous insight. Religions have not been able to take it away, but they have been certainly successful to poison it. And the same is the situation about your other things. Religions are condemning your living in comfort. Now, a man who is living in comfort and luxury cannot become a terrorist. Religions have condemned riches, praised poverty. Now a man who is rich cannot be a terrorist. Only the blessed ones who are poor can be terrorists, because they have nothing to lose. And they are boiling up against the whole society because others are having things they don't have. Religions have been trying to console them, but then came communism, a materialist religion which provoked people and said to them that your old religions are all opium to the people. And it is not your evil actions in this life or in the past lives that you are suffering poverty. It is the evil exploitation of the bourgeois, the super rich, that you are suffering. The last sentence in Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto is, proletariats of the whole world, unite. You have nothing to lose and you have to gain the whole world. You are already poor, hungry, naked. So what you can lose? Your death will not make you more miserable than your life is making you. So why not take a chance and destroy those people who have taken everything away from you? And take those things back. Distribute them. What religions have somehow been consoling people, although it was wrong and it was cunning and it was a lie. But it kept people in a state half asleep. Communism suddenly made them aware. That means this world is now never going to be peaceful if we don't withdraw all the rotten ideas that have been implanted in men. The first are the religions. Their values should be removed. so that man can smile again, can laugh again, can rejoice again, can be natural again. Second, what communism is saying has to be put clearly before the people that it is psychologically wrong. You are falling from one trap into another. No two men are equal, hence the ideal of equality is nonsense. And if you decide to be equal, then you have to accept a dictatorship of the proletariat. That means you have to lose your freedom. First, the church took away your freedom. The God took away your freedom. Now, communism replaces your church, and it will take away your freedom. And without freedom you cannot rejoice. You live in fear, not in joy. If we can clean the basement of human minds unconscious, and that's what my work is, it can be cleaned away. The terrorism is not in the bombs in your hands. The terrorism is in your unconscious. Otherwise, this state is going to grow more bitter. And it seems all blind people are having bombs in their hands and throwing them at random. Third World War would have released people for 10-15 years. But Third World War cannot happen, because if it happens, it won't relieve people, it will only destroy people. So individual violence will increase. It is increasing. And all your governments and all your religions will go on perpetuating the old strategies without understanding the new situation. The new situation is that every human being needs to go through therapies, needs to understand his unconscious intentions, needs to go through meditations so that he can calm down, become cool, and look towards the world with a new perspective of silence.
Whenever I feel miserable, a point comes when I just laugh. feel freedom return, and see that all I had done was to stop loving myself. I am always amazed to see how easily, for what and for how long, I am willing to forsake my own self-love. Is this at the roots of most people's suffering, or is it just my trip?
It is not just your trip. It is at the root of most people's suffering. But not with the meaning that you are giving to it. It is not that you have starved yourself loving, that you fall in misery. It is that you have created a self which does not exist at all. So sometimes this unreal self suffers misery in loving others, because out of unreality, love is not possible. And it is not on one side, two unrealities trying to love each other. Sooner or later this arrangement is going to fail. And when this arrangement fails, you fall upon yourself. There is nowhere else to go. So you think, I had forgotten to love myself. In a way, it is a small relief. At least instead of two unrealities, now you have only one. But what you will do by loving yourself? And how long you can manage to remain loving yourself? It is unreal. It won't allow you to see it for a long time. It is dangerous. If you see it for a long time, this so-called self will disappear. And that will be a real freedom from misery. Love will remain unaddressed to someone else or to yourself. Love will remain unaddressed because there is nobody to address. And when love is there unaddressed, there is great bliss. But this unreal self won't allow you much time. Soon you will be falling in love with someone else again. Because the unreal self needs the support of other unrealities. So people fall in love and fall out of love and fall in love and fall out of love. And strange is the phenomenon that dozens of times they do it, still they don't see the point. They are miserable when they are in love with someone else. They are miserable when they are alone and not in love. A bit relieved for the moment. In India, when a person dies, people carry him on a stretcher-like construction on their shoulders. But they go on changing on the way their shoulder. From this shoulder they will put on the right, then after a few minutes they will again change and put it on the left. It feels a relief when you put it from the left shoulder on the right. Nothing is being changed. The weight is there and on you. But this left shoulder feels a kind of relief. Momentary, because soon the right shoulder will start hurting. So you have to change it again. And this is what your life is. You go on changing the other, thinking perhaps this woman, this man will bring you the paradise you have always been longing for. But everybody brings hell without fail. And nobody is to be condemned for it, because they are exactly doing the same as you are doing. They are carrying an unreal self. Out of which nothing can grow. It cannot blossom. It is empty. Decorated, but inside empty and hollow. So when you see somebody from far away, his or she is appealing. As you come closer, the appeal becomes lesser. When you meet, it is not a meeting but a clash. and suddenly you see the other person is empty. And you have been deceived, cheated, that the other person has nothing, which was promised. And the same is the situation of the other person about you. All promises fail. And you become a burden to each other, misery to each other, sadness to each other, destructive to each other. You separate for a little while, there is relief. But your inner unreality cannot leave you in this state for long. Soon you will be searching another woman, another man. And you will get into the same trap. Only faces are different. But the inner reality is the same, empty. If you really want to get rid of misery and suffering, then you will have to understand you don't have a self. And then it will not be just a small relief, but a tremendous relief. And if you don't have a self, the need for the other disappears. It was the need of the unreal self to go on being nourished by the other. You don't need the others. And listen carefully. When you don't need the other, you can love. And that love will not bring misery. Going beyond needs, demands, desires, love becomes a very soft sharing, a great understanding. You understand yourself. That very day you have understood the whole humanity. Then nobody can make you miserable. You know that they are suffering from an unreal self, and they are throwing their misery on anybody who is close by. Your love will make you capable to help the person you love to get rid of the self. I know only of one present love can present you only with one thing, that you are not. That your self is just imaginary. And this realization between two persons suddenly makes them one. Because two nothings cannot be two. Two somethings will be two. But two nothings cannot be two. Two nothings start melting and merging. They are bound to become one. For example, if we are sitting here, if everybody is an ego, then there are so many people. They can be counted. But there are moments I can see, perhaps many times you see them too, when there is utter silence, then you cannot count how many people are here. There is only one consciousness, one silence, one nothingness, one selflessness. And only in that state two persons can live in eternal joy. Any group can live in tremendous beauty. The whole humanity can live in great benediction. But try to see the self, and you will not find it. Not finding it is of great importance. I have told many times the story of Bodhidharma and his meeting with the Chinese Emperor Wu. A very strange meeting and very fruitful. Emperor Wu perhaps was of that time the greatest emperor in the world. He ruled all over China, Mongolia, Korea, the whole Asia leaving India. he became convinced of the truth of Gautam Buddha's teachings. But the people who has brought the message of Buddha were scholars. None of them was a mystic. And then the news came that Bodhidharma is coming. And there was great thrill all over the land, because Emperor Wu has become influenced by Gautam Buddha, that has made his whole empire influenced by the same teaching. And now a real mystic, a Buddha is coming. It was such a great joy that Emperor Wu had never come to the boundaries where India and China meet to receive him. With great respect, he welcomed him and he asked him, that I have been asking all the monks and the scholars who have been coming, but nobody has been of any help. I have tried everything. But how to get rid of this self? And Buddha says, unless you become a no-self, your misery cannot end. He was sincere. Bodhidharma looked into his eyes and he said, I will be staying by the side of the river near the mountain into the temple. Tomorrow morning, 4 o'clock, exactly, you come. And I will finish this self forever. But remember, you are not to bring any arms with you, any guards with you. You have to come alone. Wu was a little worried. The man looked strange. How he can just destroy myself so quickly. It has been told by the scholars, lives and lives of meditation. Then the self disappears. This man is weird and he is wanting me in the darkness, early in the morning, 4 o'clock, alone, even without his sword. No guards, no other companion. And this man seems to be strange. He can do anything. And what does he mean that he will kill the self forever? He can kill me. But how he will kill the self? The whole night he could not sleep. He changed his mind again and again to go or not to go. But there was something in the man's eyes, and there was something in his voice, and there was some aura of authority. When he said, just come at 4 o'clock, sharp, and I will finish this self forever. You need not be worried about it. What he said looks absurd, but the way he said and the way he looked were so authoritative. That he knows what he is saying. Finally, he had to decide to go. He decided to risk. At the most, he can kill me. What else? And I have tried everything. I cannot attain this no self. And without attaining this no self, there is no end to misery. He knocked on the temple door, and Bodhidharma said, I knew you will come. I knew also that whole night you will change your decision. But that does not matter. You have come. Now sit down in the lotus posture, close your eyes, and I am going to sit in front of you. The moment you find inside yourself, catch hold of it so that I can kill it. Just catch hold of it tightly and tell me that you have caught it, and I will kill it, and it is finished. It is a question of minutes. Wu was a little afraid. Bodhidharma looked like a madman. He is painted like a madman. He was not like that, but the paintings are symbolic. That's the impression he must have been leaving on people. It is not his real face, but that must be the face that people would have been remembering. And he was sitting with his big staff in front of him, and said to him that don't miss a second. Just the moment you catch hold of it, search inside every nook and corner. Open your eyes and then tell me that you have caught it, and I will finish it. Then there was silence. 1 hour passed, 2 hours passed, and the sun was rising. And Wu was a different man. In those 2 hours, he looked inside himself. Every nook and corner, he had to look. That man was sitting there, he can hit on his head with his staff. You can expect anything, whatever. He is not a man of etiquette, manner. He is not part of his court. So he had to look intently, intensively. And as he looked, he became relaxed, because it was nowhere. And in looking at all other thoughts disappeared. The search was so intense that the whole energy was involved in it. There was nothing left to think and desire and this and that. When the sun was rising, Bodhidharma saw Wu's face. It was not the same man. Such silence, such depth. He has disappeared. Bodhidharma shook him and told him, open your eyes. It is not there. I don't have to kill it. I'm a non-violent man. I don't kill anything. But this self does not exist. Because you never look at it, it goes on existing. It is in your not looking for it, in your unawareness, that it exists. Now it is gone. 2 years, 2 hours have passed. And Wu was immensely glad. He had never tasted such sweetness, such freshness, such newness, such beauty. And he was not. And Bodhidharma fulfilled his promise. Emperor Wu bowed down, touched his feet, and said, please forgive me, thinking that you are mad, thinking that you don't know manners, thinking you that you are weird, thinking you that you can be dangerous. And I have never seen a more compassionate man than you. I am totally fulfilled. Now there is no question in me. When Emperor Wu died, he told that on his grave, the memorial, Bodhidharma's statement should be engraved in gold for the centuries to know that there was a man who looked mad, but who was capable of doing miracles without doing anything. He helped me to be a non-self. And since then, everything has changed. Everything is the same, but I am not the same. And life has become just a pure song of silence.